Miss Brooks, are you all right? The lawyer looked genuinely concerned. I couldn't answer him because I was too busy staring at the number at the bottom of the document in front of me. 7 figures, pages and pages of liability clauses, and right in the middle of it, my husband's name. I pressed my hand over my mouth, but the laugh still slipped out. Not a happy laugh. More like the kind that escapes when something is so unbelievably ridiculous your brain stops working correctly. The lawyer shifted awkwardly in his chair. I understand this may be emotionally overwhelming. I looked up at him. My parents skipped my wedding. They told people my husband was trash. And now they want me to sign this? His expression tightened instantly. That told me everything. 2 years. I hadn't spoken to my parents in 2 years. Not since my wedding day. Not since my mother posted smiling photos with my sister Vanessa at some charity gala, while my husband and I stood in front of 2 empty reserved seats with little white cards that said Mom and Dad. Not since my father told relatives I was making the biggest mistake of my life. And definitely not since I found out my mother had been calling me the disappointment behind my back. The lawyer carefully slid the document closer again. Your parents are hoping this can be resolved privately. That made me laugh harder because suddenly, for the first time, every awful thing started connecting together. The skipped wedding, the insults toward Ethan, the weird legal paperwork before the ceremony, the nonstop obsession with whether my husband was financially stable. It had never been about protecting me. It had been about protecting themselves. I leaned back slowly and looked down at the page again. There it was. My husband's full name repeated 3 separate times under financial transfer clauses connected to my sister's failed company. And suddenly I remembered the exact moment Ethan realized something was wrong. 3 nights before our wedding, my father had slid a folder across the dinner table and said, almost casually, a responsible man should have no problem signing this. At the time, I thought it was just another one of my parents' control tactics. Now I realized Ethan had seen the truth before I did. I looked back at the lawyer. Wait, I said slowly. They tried to make him responsible for this? 3 nights before the wedding, my parents invited Ethan and me over for what my mother called a final family dinner before the big day. I should have known something was wrong the second we walked in. My mother barely hugged me. My father shook Ethan's hand like he was interviewing him for a job he already planned not to give him. Meanwhile, Vanessa sat at the kitchen island scrolling through her phone, barely acknowledging us except to smirk when Ethan mentioned a renovation project he was finishing. A contractor? She said lightly. Still? Ethan stayed calm. Business has been good. Good is relative, my father replied before taking a sip of wine. I felt my stomach tighten instantly. That was how every conversation with them went. Little comments, tiny cuts. Just enough for them to deny it later. Dinner got worse fast. My mother brought up Vanessa's ex-fiancé for absolutely no reason. Daniel already owned 2 properties by your age, she told Ethan. Very driven man. Vanessa laughed into her glass. I tried redirecting the conversation. Ethan and I are doing fine. My father looked directly at Ethan. Doing fine and building stability are different things. Ethan set his fork down carefully. What exactly are you worried about? For a second, nobody spoke. Then my father reached beside his chair and pulled out a thin black folder. There's just some paperwork we'd like handled before the wedding. I blinked. Paperwork? Family protection, my mother said quickly. My father slid the folder across the table toward Ethan. The second Ethan opened it, everything changed. His expression didn't explode or harden dramatically. That almost would have been easier. Instead, he went completely still. His eyes moved slowly across the page. Then he closed the folder. No, he said calmly. My father frowned. You haven't even read all of it. I've read enough. Vanessa rolled her eyes immediately. Oh my God, it's not a blood oath. It's standard legal protection, my mother added. Ethan looked directly at my father. No, it isn't. The air in the room turned heavy. I looked between all of them, completely lost. What is happening? But nobody answered me directly. On the drive home, I finally snapped. Can somebody explain why my parents just acted like we were closing a business merger? Ethan kept his eyes on the road. They're trying to protect someone. What does that even mean? I need to confirm something first. I stared at him. Confirm what? He hesitated just long enough to scare me. Then he said quietly, your parents aren't worried about you marrying the wrong guy. He tightened his grip on the steering wheel. They're worried about the wrong person being stuck with something. The next morning, my mother acted like nothing had happened. No apology, no explanation, just endless wedding instructions through text messages. Then the wedding day came, and my parents never showed up. At first, guests kept assuming they were late. Then whispers started. Then phones came out. My cousin Rachel walked over looking horrified and handed me hers without speaking. It was my mother's social media page. A smiling photo of my parents standing beside Vanessa at her charity gala across town. The caption read, "So proud of the daughter who still makes smart decisions." 3 days after the wedding, my mother invited the entire family to Sunday brunch like nothing had happened. Not me. Everybody else. Rachel was the one who told me. They're acting like your wedding never happened, she said over the phone. You should come. So I did. And the second I walked into the restaurant, every conversation at the long table stopped. My father looked irritated instead of surprised. Vanessa looked amused. My mother gave me that tight smile she used whenever she wanted strangers to think she was kind. Natalie, she said carefully, this really isn't the place. I pulled out a chair anyway. Funny. You didn't seem worried about timing when you skipped my wedding. Several relatives immediately looked down at their menus. Vanessa sighed dramatically. Can we not do this in public? In public? I laughed once. You humiliated me in public. My father leaned back in his chair. You're being emotional. That word, emotional. The family's favorite way to dismiss me whenever they didn't want accountability. I looked directly at him. Why weren't you there? My mother jumped in first. Vanessa needed us. For a gala? For a crisis, my father corrected sharply. That caught my attention immediately. Vanessa straightened in her seat. Dad, no, I interrupted. Actually explain this to me. Because apparently my wedding mattered less than whatever Vanessa had going on. People at nearby tables were openly listening now. My mother lowered her voice. Her company was under pressure. I frowned. What does that mean? Vanessa folded her arms. It means business is complicated. I stared at her. You told everybody your company was thriving. It was. She snapped. My father cut in fast. The point is, your sister needed family support. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Over the last 5 years, my parents had poured money into Vanessa's luxury wellness startup nonstop. Every failed launch, every investor issue, every expensive rebrand. Meanwhile, when I needed help paying college loans years ago, my father told me, responsible adults solve their own problems. And somehow, I was still the disappointment. My mother suddenly looked at me coldly across the table. You abandoned your family over one missed event. I stared at her in disbelief. One missed event? You chose him over us, she said. Right then, Ethan walked into the restaurant. He'd come to pick me up. The second my father saw him, his expression darkened. That man, he said loudly enough for nearby tables to hear, is going to drag you down with him. Ethan stopped beside the table calmly. Then he asked the question that changed everything. Did you tell her what was actually inside that agreement? Silence. Complete silence. Vanessa's face lost color instantly. My father's jaw tightened. My mother looked furious. I turned toward Ethan slowly. What agreement? Vanessa spoke too quickly. It was standard legal protection. That's not true, Ethan said. My father stood abruptly. This conversation is over. But Ethan didn't move. Instead, he looked directly at me. The document mentioned debt liability tied to Vanessa's company. Every sound in the restaurant suddenly felt distant. I looked at my sister. Debt. Vanessa stood up so fast her chair scraped loudly against the floor. You have no idea what you're talking about, she snapped at Ethan. But she wouldn't look at me. And for the first time in my entire life, I saw fear on her face. Outside the restaurant, I grabbed Ethan's arm before he could open the car door. How much debt are we talking about? Ethan didn't answer right away. That scared me more than anything else. He leaned against the car for a second, looking back toward the restaurant windows where my family was still sitting in stunned silence. Then he finally said, millions. I actually laughed once because my brain rejected it immediately. Stop. I'm serious. No. Vanessa runs a wellness brand. She sells overpriced skin products and hosts retreats for rich women. She also took private loans, Ethan said, and your parents guaranteed them. The parking lot suddenly felt too small. I stared at him. How do you even know this? Because the paperwork your father gave me wasn't a prenup. He rubbed his jaw slowly. It transferred liability exposure through marriage and shared assets. If I signed it, I could have been tied to debt connected to Vanessa's company. I felt sick. Every conversation over the past year replayed differently in my head. My parents constantly asking about Ethan's savings, his insurance, whether we planned to buy property together. At the time, it felt invasive. Now it felt calculated. You think they wanted you legally attached before everything collapsed, I said quietly. I know they did. That was the moment something inside me finally broke. Not loudly, not dramatically, just permanently. I stopped answering my parents' calls that same week. Then I blocked Vanessa. After that, silence. 2 years of it. And honestly, life got better. Ethan and I bought a small house outside the city. Nothing flashy, but it was ours. No family drama, no guilt, no constant comparisons. For the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to earn approval that never came. Meanwhile, little rumors kept floating back through relatives. My father sold a vacation property. My mother stopped hosting charity events. Vanessa's company suddenly disappeared from social media. But nobody ever contacted me directly until the letter arrived. Certified mail. Law office header. Request for immediate response. I thought maybe someone was sick or dead. Instead, I found myself sitting across from a lawyer in a quiet office downtown while he carefully explained that Vanessa was currently unavailable. What does unavailable mean? I asked. The lawyer adjusted his glasses carefully. Your sister has left the country. I stared at him. What? There are ongoing financial disputes involving her company. Disputes. Such a polite word for disaster. Then he slid the document toward me. Your parents are hoping you'll cooperate with a restructuring arrangement. I started reading. Halfway down the second page, my stomach dropped. Liability transfer clauses, trust restructuring language, shared exposure terms. And then I saw it. An older reference attached as supporting documentation. The exact same legal structure Ethan refused to sign before our wedding. Only now my name was replacing his. I looked up slowly. You tried this with him first. The lawyer said nothing, which was answer enough. Everything connected at once. The skipped wedding, the insults, the pressure, the public humiliation. They weren't angry that I married Ethan. They were angry he wouldn't protect them. The lawyer cleared his throat carefully. Miss Brooks, if your parents cannot redistribute some of this liability, they may lose nearly everything. I looked back down at the final page. Then I saw the total amount tied to the lawsuits. And suddenly, I burst out laughing. The lawyer looked completely unprepared for my reaction. I laughed so hard I had to wipe tears from my face. Not because it was funny, because it was unbelievable. After everything my parents had done to me, this was how it ended? Miss Brooks, the lawyer said cautiously, I understand this situation is difficult. Difficult? I interrupted. My parents skipped my wedding because my husband wouldn't sign himself into financial ruin. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. That silence confirmed more than any explanation could. I leaned forward and tapped the document. So let me make sure I understand this correctly. They spent years calling Ethan the wrong guy because he was the only person smart enough not to sign this? The lawyer exhaled slowly. Your parents believed the business would recover. I shook my head in disbelief. No, they believed somebody else would pay for it. And finally, piece by piece, the full truth came out. Vanessa's company had been failing long before my wedding. The luxury branding, the influencer campaigns, the charity galas, all of it had been funded with borrowed money, private loans, emergency refinancing, personal guarantees. My parents had quietly tied themselves to millions trying to keep Vanessa's image alive. Then, their accountant warned them they needed another legally connected party attached to future liability structures if they wanted any breathing room. That was where Ethan came in, not because they trusted him, because he was stable, responsible, careful with money, everything Vanessa wasn't. The family protection agreement before the wedding was never about protecting me. It was about spreading financial exposure before the collapse became public. When Ethan refused to sign, my parents panicked. Suddenly, he became the wrong guy. Suddenly, I became the disappointment. Skipping the wedding wasn't just punishment. It was pressure. Public humiliation meant to isolate me from him and push me back toward them. But it failed because Ethan saw through them immediately. And somehow, he still stayed calm for my sake. I sat quietly for a moment after the lawyer finished. Then I picked up the pen sitting beside the document. The lawyer straightened slightly. Hope, actual hope crossed his face. I signed exactly one thing, the refusal. Then I slid the papers back across the desk. I'm not cleaning up Vanessa's mess, I said. And I'm definitely not cleaning up theirs. Outside the building, I called Ethan immediately. He answered on the second ring. Well, he asked. I started laughing again before I could even speak. Natalie? They tried it again, I said through tears. The exact same thing. There was a pause. Then Ethan sighed softly, like he'd expected it all along. People hiding that much debt always come back looking for someone else to carry it. I stood on the sidewalk outside the law office while traffic moved around me and realized something strange. I didn't feel guilty anymore, not even a little. Over the next few months, everything unraveled publicly. The lawsuits became public record first. Then local business articles started covering Vanessa's collapsed company. Creditors went after my parents' assets. My father sold the family home quietly before the court could force it. My mother disappeared from every charity board she used to brag about. And the same social circle that spent years praising Vanessa suddenly acted like they barely knew her. The biggest shock? Vanessa never came back. According to one relative, she cut contact completely once the money disappeared. The daughter my parents sacrificed everything for vanished the second. There was nothing left to take. Meanwhile, Ethan and I kept building our own life. No family money, no fake status, just peace. About 6 months later, we bought a modest house with a huge backyard Ethan loved because he finally had room for his workshop. The night we moved in, I found a stack of unopened holiday cards from my parents shoved in the back of a kitchen drawer. For a second, I just stared at them. 2 years earlier, I would have opened every single one hoping for an apology. Now, I dropped them straight into the trash. Ethan looked over from the living room. "You okay?" I smiled for what felt like the first honest smile in years. "Yeah," I said. "I finally am." And the truth was, for the first time in my life, being the disappointment felt exactly like freedom.